Hi all, I just wanted to make a video on property management. So when I first got started, I rented the other rooms out to my colleagues at university. So because I know them quite well and I didn't know anything about landlord or tenant rights or ASTs or any kinds of contracts or things like that, it was more word of mouth. And because I used to live with them and know them quite well, we generally got on and they did pay their rent. This is quite an informal arrangement, and it's more just having friends living in your house and them paying you money. There was no deadlines or things like that. Luckily they were relatively honest and did pay me on time. I lived in this way for about 2 years in the house in Manchester, and then in the fourth year I moved back to Halls and we handed the property to an agency. The agency then fully managed it and got tenants in quickly, and it was rented out and fully managed. Then later on, when selling this property and buying properties in Coventry, as the properties were more local to us, we thought it would be better to self-manage. So in this case, we just paid for the tenant-only kind of arrangement with the agency. So the agency were supposed to have vetted and checked the tenants, and they supplied me with tenants. They then lived in the house, and because it was the tenancy-only agreement, there was no management fee involved. And I dealt with maintenance myself and things like that. There were many problems with this sort of approach, mostly because the agencies we used to use were not really honest, and we had tenant issues. So some tenants ran off with furniture, others just disappeared, another one ran off owing £2,000 worth of rent. I tried to take him to court, found out where he worked and knew other things about his employment history, and from things like that we were able to find out his address and then take him to court. But I went to court, I had to take out time. I was studying in London at the time, I had to come back to Coventry, went to court, and he never showed up. So this is all due to tenants being very dodgy and not being vetted properly, and it's all down to using an agency that's not really very good at what they do. So you can see from these examples that when self-managing properties you have to be very careful. It can take a lot of time and it's usually not worth it unless you know the tenants very well. Even then, if you rent properties to tenants, a lot of people expect mates rates and things like that, and if they damage the property and you have to claim from their deposit or get them to pay, this can lead to fallout. So it's often not really a viable option to renting your property, in terms of renting your properties out to people you know. Then from going from agency to agency, I finally discovered an agency who did seem to vet tenants quite well. They subsequently placed tenants in my property in Coventry, and for the first time in a long time these tenants seemed to consistently pay rent on time, and they were reliable and stuck to the contracts mostly. So for some years I then stuck with this agency, and I was using the self-managed model in this context. I was working in Coventry, then I moved to Milton Keynes, then I worked in London after that, and by the time I was in London in 2019 I had about 10 rental properties and they're all self-managed. The tenants were provided by this agency and they're all consistently paying rent. In 2019 I moved back to the West Midlands, and as I networked quite a lot I developed further contacts. I discovered another agency and I knew the owner, I got to know him very well. He gave me a lot of advice. Attending these kinds of landlord meetups is often better than a mentorship. You can learn more in 1 hour dealing with professional landlords and agents than you can on many courses in many weeks. And by then I'd understood the principles of wealth and building wealth. It's better to delegate things that are not your specialism to other people who specialise in these kinds of things. So not only just vetting tenants and sourcing tenants, also managing and placing tenants. This can all be done by a professional agency.